Here. Barry,
Yeah,
how you doing?
do it.
Would you be better off sitting in like one of these solid chairs?
I'll do whatever I gotta do.
Okey-dokey. All right. And I think I'm going to assume that we are now on the live stream, so we'll welcome everybody to the Thursday, July 22nd Town Board Workshop. We have 3 agenda items tonight. The first 2 should take literally about 2 minutes, and then the headliner tonight is Pete Baker from Bartle and Judas and Art Patrone from Webster to go over a discussion on the milestone event timeline for phase 2 of the sewer plant. The first 2 items, real quickly, I guess. New York State consolidated funding application for grants this year, and I'm sure every year has a deadline for submission on July 31st, which is, I think, 9 days away. And Matt Chatfield is spearheading the grant application process on Sandbar Park. Anybody that went to the open houses and saw the financial summary of Sandbar Park, right in there was we were hoping to apply for as much as $3 million plus. Actually, Matt just walked into the room. So one of the things we want to do, and it's really part of the application process, is just go on record to show that the town board is acknowledging and in support of this application, and also, I guess, authorizing the application and acknowledging that there may be on some of the components of that grant town matches. And then our own Director of Community Development, Josh Artuzo, is going to be applying on the town's behalf through the CFA of New York State for what looks to be about a $100,000 grant related to updating the 2008 comprehensive plan. And same things that I just said about Sandbar. The town board needs to show in that application that we are authorizing it, supporting of it, and acknowledging that there may be some town matching money. So, any questions? Second. I think we got to do one at a time. Is that correct, Ellie?
Yes.
So I'm going to make a motion that for the town board of Webster to authorize the submission of a grant application related to Sandbar Park through the New York State CFA, and as the board acknowledges that there may be a local match.
Second.
Supervisor Flaherty?
Aye.
Councilman Abbott?
Aye.
Councilman Dean?
Aye.
Councilman Cahill?
Aye.
Councilwoman Sullivan? Aye.
Bill, before I read the next one, you think you got one more in you to chair a comprehensive, no, you done, you retired? Okay.
I
You know what?
did too, that was enough.
Yeah, that is enough. To tell you the truth, that's 1 too many, actually. You plus your place in heaven, but, I make a motion that the town board of Webster authorizes submission of grant application related to updating the 2008 comprehensive plan for the New York State CFA grant process, and that the town board acknowledges there may be a possible town match.
Second.
Supervisor Flaherty?
Aye.
Councilman Cahill? Councilman Dean?
Aye.
Councilman Abbott?
Aye.
Councilwoman Sullivan? Aye.
Thank you, and that took, I told you, okay, 5:40 at the latest you'll be up. It's 5:35, so without further ado, Art and Pete, you're on.
So the supervisor had asked us to discuss the next few months and what the schedule may look like.
I think we all got it.
Yes.
Okay. So to really explain the calendar, Pete, that actually took a lot of time putting together.
Pull the microphone closer to you.
Pete Baker is here to discuss the calendar he created for us. We all stay on track, and we'll all learn what it means a little bit more in detail.
Okay, thanks, sir. Yeah, this is essentially the calendar. Last week I was here, starting the secret process with the notice of intent resolution was passed, and the letter went out. So essentially, this is designed to kind of get the current, the
Can I,
proposed.
does it make more sense, Karen, to go to the podium for Pete?
I can get, because he's on one of those.
I was gonna kind of point the boxes here for you if that helps, or whatever works, so.
I got him, and he's on one
I'm
of
like
those.
right now.
Okay, well, there you have it. All right. Sorry, Pete.
That's okay. So we started the process last week. I did update the schedule. I just Xed out where we are with respect to, so as you can see, we've gone through several steps. As far as the secret process, this is intended to, when I say shovel readiness, there's two things we're looking for. Completion of seeker, basically developing the determination of significance, and then a bond resolution under town law part 202B. Those two components are required for, it's already required for the Water Improvement Infrastructure Act, the WIA grant. We've talked about the town currently is working on their WIA grant for the current project. So that defines shovel readiness, and once those two are complete, once the program is announced, it hasn't been announced yet from EFC, once that's announced, you'll have basically the necessary components to apply for that grant. This is really just to kind of get it to that point. So it's essentially the walkthrough for seeker, and it's the walkthrough for the 202B town board resolution. Most of the stuff we're working on with Art and then Ken and Dolly as far as the submittals, and then anything at Tank really would be towards the bottom here is more or less with the bond council as far as authoring the bond resolutions. So it's color coded, items are blue are action items for being out as far as when we need to submit paperwork to Ken and to Dolly, and then agenda items and paperwork. Right now, as of last Friday, the letters were submitted for the notice for the town to seek lead agency status. They were submitted, it's a 30-day waiting period, so we're going to be quiet for a couple weeks until those letters come back. Once those letters come back, we'll start that. Actually, the determination of significance, the actual environmental review that goes along with seeker. The way we have it set up in seeker, technically, seeker can be, you can complete the part 2, which is essentially the environmental findings, and part 3 is the determination of significance, and then you can go through all the steps in one night. It's not uncommon. The way we have time, so the way we've got the schedule set up is that essentially the part 2 and 3 would be submitted to the board. The board has the opportunity to review that. It's actually the formal submittal. And on the next time in front of the board would be on August 19th. At that point in time, the letters come back from DEC, from EFC, the other agencies indicating whether or not they object to the town seeking to be lead agency. Once the town establishes lead agency, we would have the part 2 and 3 get after the board's consideration at a board meeting. On the following day, we want to start that 202B process. Basically, that requires some advertising in the Webster Herald, so we've kind of got those items and needs submitted on August 20th. On the following week, on the workshop, basically the workshop on the 26th, essentially that's our intent is to formally present part 2 and 3. Ultimately, that's where the town, it's a workshop, so we can walk through what is in the EAFs. And then that's really gives the board the opportunity to kind of review and consider what the impacts of the project would be. The other part of that would be on that day, even though it's not the action, we've got the 202B public hearing, we need that to be advertised in order to meet the 10 to 20 day advance notice to have a formal public hearing to advance the bond resolution. And then on the September 2nd, basically we've got determination of significance would be the action that the board would hold. That in and of itself would complete the secret from the board's perspective. We need to follow up and post that determination of the environmental news bulletin. After that, we're really looking at now with the bond resolution stage thing. So there would be a public hearing on the following week, September 9th, in which case the our proposal would be the public hearing would be opened up. It's a workshop, and then anybody that wants to comment can comment at that meeting. Or certainly, and then leave the public hearing open for a week, and then the public hearing would be closed the following week on the 16th. And at that point in time, then discussions can be had regarding the bond resolution, and the bond resolution can be accepted. So really got to sketch it through the seeker and the bond resolution through mid-September. Historically, the grant that the town would be pursuing for this project, it's typically announced around now. It was not announced last year. So we're kind of going off of history where it's more or less a mid-September submittal. The fact that we haven't heard anything is probably going to, my guess is it's going to be delayed, it's probably going to be October simply because the EFC has not come up with any type of guidance on when this is coming out at this point. But it didn't come out last year. We're anticipating it will be announced this year.
All of these effort hours are included in the current amendment, current.
Yeah, so,
contract, correct?
okay, good point. So right now, we are under contract with the town for the PER, the FlexX study, and then actually we have another part of that, which is seeker. So essentially, the work that we're doing right now is all under our current authorization for this work. So we pretty much, PER is more or less wrapped up, more in the seeker phase of that. So that's pretty much takes us to the kind of the 202B resolution. Really, we amended the PER to include a map and plan in that. So the map and plan part of that, which is required for 202B, that's been completed. Probably, I can send that to you. You probably would want to take a look at that and make sure that you're
Now, are all the responses for seeker going to be going to you?
No, they should be going to Dow. So that's how the letter was structured. So typically, you're going to get SHPO, we submit that online. They don't take letters anymore. We'll get something from SHPO.
What's SHPO?
It's State Historic. So basically, they will
Yes.
essentially really know historic issues with the current site. DEC will provide probably more detailed assessment on their concurrence that the town can seek lead agencies has. So like Carol, I think on the one point that 202B, we amended the PER to kind of prove a map and plan. So I'll send that to you. You can kind of see what the map and plan basically is a document that is required under 202B that establishes the maximum.
It's under town law for those of you that.
Yeah, I say 202B, that's basically town law. It establishes the maximum amount to be financed. The actual PER has a conceptual plan of finance as well, in different scenarios if the town did get a grant, the town didn't get a grant, and ultimately looking at what the long-term debt service would be for the user. So that's it. I guess I'm here to answer any questions or
You
I just,
okay,
yeah.
Thank you. Nice call.
I did change the font of this here, so it's saying I upsized like. Okay. Yeah, I think the colors look nice and clear screen, kind of loud.
If you want, you can't read it, send me a note or Pete a note with an email to you.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions, but I also don't want to just, I don't want to jump ahead of the other board members.
Well, this is pretty much just a time frame.
Right.
So this isn't really anything to do with the process or the project. It's all just a time frame for all submittals, right?
Yeah, for this basically gets the project to shovel-ready status. I mean, the next phase of this project would be, establishing a schedule for pre-design investigation, preliminary design submittals, that type of thing. So in the PER we developed, there is one of the last sections has an actual conceptual schedule for when, big picture-wise, design, submittals to agencies, and basically going through, construct bidding, construction start, construction end.
During this process, there will the people that were here a while ago come back before us to, will we be able to discuss numbers, anything about the project?
So as far as the cost of the project,
The cost of the project?
that hasn't changed. I mean, so when we were here on June 24th, that was a $31 million, the actual number's like 30.98. The overall project cost hasn't changed at all. Really, the next step would be the design process. And when the town wants to commence with that. I know there's some aggressive timelines that have been kind of internally, so I think that's really the next piece.
I know we want to be aggressive to getting all the things done on time and just,
So right now, this gets you to the point of, this is a September 15th, mid-September completion. Being that DFC has not made any kind of announcement regarding the WIA grant application, I think this is a safe timeline to kind of get there. If it should happen, the DFC announcements, we can certainly look at expediting some of the items here. I don't envision that happening, where they would come up with a grant and say, all these things are turned in. So again, like the secret, the final determination of significance, that a lot of times that happens in a night. The part 2 and 3 is discussed, the board makes a resolution to, regarding significance, that can all happen. This way, we've kind of got the ability to, we show due diligence, from EFC standpoint, DEC standpoint, the town is truly considered, had time to consider the potential impacts of the project.
This is probably too early to ask, but since we last had that meeting, things have changed a little bit, and the village has decided to keep their own sewage treatment plant with their own improvements. So, from our perspective, there's going to be some rerouting of their,
No,
nothing's going to change.
correct.
Okay, that was my question.
There's a common outfall. They need to work out with the DEC how they're going to treat the common outfall, basically, because it's a compliance point of the town. It's been basically combined compliance points. They will need to establish their own compliance point. They may have impacts on how the town, basically monitors where the compliance point will be.
Right, I just want to be sure it's not going to have any impact on our plan, and if so, let me ask the next question, who's going to pay for that, but thanks for that.
I think that on the compliance, if something needs to happen with what DEC required and how the town, because the town currently monitors on the combined compliance point.
Correct.
So if they need to amend that based on the village's actions, then it probably is something where the town could ask for compensation, but it would be part of the village project to kind of make sure that you have got 2 permittable and approvable compliance points.
Thank you.
last year when we talked about this, we were at a figure of around $20 million, 19 something, and now we're at 31. And at last Thursday's village board meeting, the question was asked or stated that we've jumped to $10 million and how that happened. Well, apparently people in the public don't know that we've added something to the project other than the first segment of it, and that would be the drying system.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that needs to get out there so that we know, and the benefits of the drying system, the cost of it, the reasoning behind it. We've listened to it, and it's all made really good sense to us. Whether we choose to spend that amount, I don't know yet. But from what the information that we've gathered, that particular system will pay for itself in a fairly short period of time and possibly create enough revenue for us to offset the actual principal of this yearly bond.
Yeah, the whole driver is, and actually it's the sludge dryer. There's actually one of the other issues is the septic receiving. So there's a beefier septic receiving station too that would be positioned. It kind of makes the ability for local haulers to kind of come in and bring septic in. It makes it easier for those haulers, makes it more attractive for them to utilize the operation. So it's a quicker operation, it's a cleaner operation. So those are the 2 big, because that septic system in and of itself is a pretty, I think that was almost about $1 million to $1.5 million ticket. So,
Last year, what was our hauling fee, do you know, last year?
On fee, I think it was close to 400.
400,000?
Yeah, I think it was north of 400. So, and to your point, Pete, on the septic receiving facility, right now it's done by the honor system. This would be all automated and computerized. It will send the consensus on a monthly basis, and it'll be accurate. Anything else they put in, that's what we return.
One of the things we talked about was the receiving of the leachate. Our committee that did the town village thing, we had a speaker came in from Wayne County, I forget his name.
Marty.
Marty.
Name it.
Payman. And his comment to us was that, as far as leachate, we might be a little bit late on that, because they're already building one out there in Wayne County, and that's where the majority of the haulers are gonna come from, because they don't have.
It's
Sewers.
market, so a lot of times with DOW or treatment plants, leachate, you know, quite frankly, you're talking about two facilities. You're talking about Seneca Metals and Ontario County Landfill. I was just meeting with Seneca Metals yesterday, and their projected leachate, I work in Seneca Falls, so we're familiar with their operation. They're projecting 100 million gallons a year of leachate in, you know, the very near future. So I mean, I think that what happens with those market, with landfills in general, you're gonna see come March, April, May, the wet season, there's never enough outlets for it. So it comes down to economics, really. And for economics, it's treatment, which is what the town would see, and then the cost of they have to pay the hauler. So plants that are farther away, in order to kind of bring the revenue in, they may have to adjust that value. The pro forma we put together, I think the numbers that we had for leachate were reflective of, like, I think pre-2018 rates, and quite frankly, those were they were very dated rates. They were pretty low for treating raw leachate. So I think there's, you know, that even with low rates, I mean, if you kind of end up being in the market to some extent, they certainly are, you know, I think very competitive in what, you know, we see in other facilities can charge. So again, but it's hauling too. So
Yeah.
facilities like High Acres they're gonna use the county facility, they're gonna use the county treatment plant. You know, I don't see that changing anytime ever, really. They'll always rely on the county for their treatment. So yeah, it's a market. You're certainly competing with other facilities, but just because another facility is there that has it, it's well, a couple things. It's rates, as we talked about, but also throughput too. So if a hauler can come in and he can get in and out quickly, that's, you know, if you can grab another trip out a given day, that's the benefit there. So a lot, you know, that has a lot to do with it as well.
Okay.
I don't want to say crystal ball, but, you know, I think the way we've looked at this is that the town's now got time to kind of start, you know, start reaching out and identify where those markets are. So, it's always, you know, you bring in revenue, and leachate, I think, is one where, I don't see any facilities coming up with a system that is going to be, it's going to meet their needs 100% of the time. So there's always going to be excess leachate, at least in those two facilities we're looking at.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I gotta tell you something, I'm very glad that Paul Adams is here tonight, the town's finance director. I'm very glad that Matt Chatfield is here tonight. Based on the position, Matt, that you have as the executive director of WIDA, and your knowledge of grant applications, and how you've educated me on certain things. That's my first question I'm gonna ask, is I think that Pete, you're gonna help in answering some of these. Art, I wouldn't be surprised if you are helpful in answering some of my questions, and I think Paul and Matt will too. So my first question is, shovel ready. I know, Matt, that's something that you really get all excited about, shovel ready. And do you mind, so we can elaborate on what shovel ready means, what the opportunity is? And I'd like to make sure you got a microphone on you, because I just want to make sure I understand why we would go in the next 2 months through this timeline of events to become shovel ready. I think it is.
Yes. Okay. Well, I mean, from an economic development and land development perspective, shovel-ready would mean that the site has all its environmental approvals and what we call entitlements, which would be approvals from both the local municipality and any other state agencies or federal agencies regarding permits. And then, of course, any title of due diligence work would also be accomplished so that the site would be essentially ready for some form of construction to take place. Now, Mr. Baker probably has a different definition from what he deals with, and I'll defer to him on the water wastewater aspect.
Yeah, we're putting putting the project in position to apply for the WE grant, which I mentioned PER too, so it's PER, it's completion environmental reviews.
So we should in position to apply.
So we would apply for the WE grant, ultimately, you're applying for a grant, so that's the town that's been successful in the past. We talked, I think, a little bit on the prior meeting, June 24th, the demonstration that EFC wants, the EFC's function is to provide money, grant funds to communities to make these developments. They don't want to give the money away, they don't think it's going to be used. So the town has a WE grant, they've successfully used it, applied it really quickly. So that buys points with respect to EFC. And they're going to support projects where grant money is being used, because that's their sole function. They don't want to give grant money away to communities that aren't going to spend money.
Right. Okay, and then, next, I mean, I'm trying to figure out financially the pros and cons of getting to this shovel-ready thing. And Matt, I think one of the things you told me that, especially today, in July of 2021, the society we're in, with trillion-dollar infrastructure bills being discussed as I was coming over here on the radio and all that stuff. Shovel-ready, and correct me if I'm wrong, additional monies have come available to the town of Webster for this project, over and above the WIA grant, would favor the shovel-ready project.
The term that is used more in the realm of economic development, or as far as grants go, would be called project readiness, but it's very similar. In other words, how far along are you? Do you know what you need to know to advance the project, and are you ready to advance the project? Including not only from a physical or design perspective, but do you have, your capital arrangements and your financing pretty much in order, and you're ready to move forward relatively quickly. So it's called project readiness, but it's a very similar concept in government work versus private.
Okay. Because like we just talked about at the beginning here, that there's a July 31st deadline in the New York State CFA grants. So we obviously are, if that's the same deadline every year, we wouldn't be in a position to apply for a New York State CFA. And maybe none of those agencies would even consider additional money beyond WIA, or is, you follow where I'm coming from?
The agencies that are typically involved in the CFA process don't necessarily line up with the type of capital improvements you're considering for water and wastewater. The WIA grants tend to have their own schedule that does differ from the CFA process. So it's not, I wouldn't suggest that in next July, the CFA cycle typically opens in May, submissions are due in July. I don't foresee, based on the programs that are typically available within the CFA process, a significant amount of money being available for wastewater improvements that you would wait to submit for next July. The program structure that Mr. Baker is talking about is likely going to be where you're going to get most of your money from, and it's on a separate schedule entirely.
So yeah, there is on the CFA, there's DEC has what's called water quality improvement program. It does address wastewater programs. Typically, that's a co-funding opportunity that the town would have. We is really the main driver of the money available, and a lot of times DEC will target specific processes. So over the past probably 3 years, it's been facilities that don't have disinfection or require disinfection. The town has a disinfection process, and they've never been eligible for that. But there's always the ability to apply for that after the fact. It's, that's an opportunity that would be explored. I think next year it's not during the process, wherever state projects are. But typically, you would want to apply for that after you've kind of gone through the main grant review process. So it's something that would be supplemented. You take a look at it to see where the DEC, it's a limited pool of money, and where the DEC is, putting those funds in a particular year.
Paul, I think this one might be for you. All right. So you've got a nice, pretty color-coded thing here that Pete put together that culminates on September 16th, if we follow this. And on September 16th, if we followed this, and you admit it, very aggressive, all right? But if we followed this, we're doing a bond resolution, adopting a bond resolution on the 16th of September. A bond resolution of what? $31 million? $15 million?
Well,
And you
Yeah,
might-
I mean, I
I'm
think it would
sorry, you
be-
might need to go up,
Sure.
sorry, Paul.
I think it would be similar to the phase one project where we adopted a resolution for the full amount of the project. But of course, we ended up borrowing quite a bit less, because 25% was paid through a grant. So I think it doesn't hurt to pass a resolution for a higher amount than what you think you're going to actually bond. There's no rule against that.
And, okay, and this might be a Charlie question, is that, let's say that on this schedule, there'd be a public hearing, people would come in and all that, and let's say we get, and we do a bond resolution for $31 million, with the logic that you just gave,
Right.
all right? Then a 30-day permissive referendum, is it?
Yes.
Okay.
Because at that point, we won't know if we have the WIA grant, right?
Right.
Yeah, you're right.
So you have to cover it.
If the program happens typically 3 months before you kind of, the grant submission is made, and then you find out if you got one or not. So you would, depending on what time, when the actual grant comes out and is announced, probably spend about 3 months. It's gonna be very competitive year, it's just because the program didn't happen last year.
How much money does the town end up paying, if anything, with bond council and all that stuff to do a resolution for 31 million?
Just to do the resolution, I think it should be just a few thousand. We'd have Municipal Solutions, our bond consultant would be involved, and Harris Beach, our bond attorney. I would guess, 3,000 or 4,000.
And then Charlie, is there any, or say, formal resolutions subsequent to bond resolution where the board is saying, okay, now we really mean it, we are going to earn that money?
No, well, no, once we get through the resolutions prepared by Municipal Solutions and Bond Council, they have a certain set of procedures that they are going to do for us. And once that happens, no.
Well, I'm going to answer the question. So let's say the board tries, you know what, Paul's logic is correct, so we don't have to come back. We'll just go for the higher 31 million, but we really anticipate that we're only going to have to bond 20 million or less based on a lot of moving parts, WIA grants, other things that are happening. I hate to use your term, Matt, generational opportunities are staring us in the face right now for grants. It's just a fact, right? But if the board all of a sudden said, this did not, middle of 2022, this did not pan out the way we thought, we're not going to move forward with this. Are we stuck because we did a bond resolution back in September?
Well, the bond resolution enables us to submit the bonds for public consumption, I guess you call it, or for purchase. I'm not sure, I guess I understand. I mean, once you put it out there, then you have a bond, you have to deal with the bond.
So you mean that as soon as September 16th happens, the bond is issued? And
No. All that does is that authorizes the town to borrow money up to this amount. The way we're bonding it, the way the bond basically means is that you're going out to the market and you're selling the debt.
So now what I'm saying is that it's almost like we authorize 100 shares of common stock.
Right, yeah.
But it's still.
It's somewhat similar to that, yeah.
When is the decision of actually borrowing the money where now,
Well, that's why you have an expert like Paul on board, because Paul now, between him and Municipal Solutions, will go out and they'll lowest amount of.
I'm not doing a good job asking the question. Let's take phase one. We went and did a $12 million bond resolution at some
Yeah.
point, right? And then between when you did the bond resolution, you got shovel ready, and then you went and did the WIA grant, and you got it, it was $3 million, and all of a sudden you said, well, I gotta start, when the contract would go out to bid, all that stuff. Where in the process that is outside of this timeline, it's after September, this timeline, when do we borrow the money?
23.
We
That's
borrowed
a
money-
year, Bill, I'm talking about an event. When do we borrow the money?
Prior to construction beginning, I think that's what we do at phase one. In anticipation, that would be, probably a few months before, so we had the money. You wouldn't borrow the whole amount, you would start with bond anticipation notes. You would just borrow what you think you're gonna need in the next year, and you gradually work your way up through the project. So it might be
Right.
borrowed over 3 or 4 years. And at the end, you roll it all together into a serial bond.
Right, we just did that.
1 year bond anticipation
Yeah.
notes, rolling.
You're asking, Tom, I think, is there a time within which you have to absolutely?
Well, I just wanted to make sure, I wanted to make sure, and if these are dumb questions, I apologize,
No,
but I
no,
always
no.
said
Good
the
question.
dumbest question is the one not asked.
Right.
I wanted to make sure that we weren't all of a sudden on we had $31 million of debt on September 17th.
No.
We're paying the interest and we got the money sitting in the bank. And so, and I assumed we didn't, but you know what happens when you assume.
Yeah.
And now that makes sense, is that we just went through this process, we just perfected or whatever, the long-term debt
Correct.
on several projects over the last 5 years. But
Yes.
it was $11 million, the majority of it was phase one,
Yes.
but it was the renovation of your, I got it, all right? So you would, even though the board has gone and said, hey, we're doing a resolution of bonding, indebting the town up to $31 million. There's still a lot of game left to make sure that that is a lot less than that. But, public could come in and say, wow, you're gonna bond, you're so, okay.
So I'm projecting your question and your answer, I apologize for interrupting. Question to Mark would be, with respect to construction, because as you just noted, we're going to borrow for the different stages of construction. Am I understanding that correct?
Correct.
So there's an additional 10 million was for septic, receiving, and the drying system. Where does that fall within the construction of phase two?
Ideally, I think those are two pieces you want to do first. Well, at least the sludge dryer, the main driver for this project is the $400,000 to $500,000 that the town's currently spending on getting rid of the biosolids. And ultimately, that contract expires next year, there's a big unknown what's going to happen. So the sludge dryer can go in and effectively, it's essentially there just to kind of knock moisture out. So that, once that's operational, that's an instant decrease in what those costs are. So there's other things that need to be done, but that's from a pro forma cost standpoint,
No, you're absolutely right, I mean, that's.
They will go first.
That would absolutely go first, that's what's
I
gonna
would
knock our
prefer,
costs
that's
down,
where you're gonna see the.
and that's gonna drive us back into some more revenue to pay for the other stuff. And he did mention the septic receiving. That's a revenue source right there. The quicker we can get that up and going, it would be a nice facility.
Okay.
Well, and
But in tandem with that, John, I mean, obviously there's other things going on in parallel as well.
Right.
But absolutely, those would be priorities.
in Barry, I think you articulated very well that, when there was a per estimate done a couple of years ago on phase two, it was 19.7 million. And a couple of years go by because we've been doing phase one. And also there's been discussion of, well, maybe we should consolidate and all that. And last August, Lavella and Cardinal Judas presented a public meeting, whatever, a Zoom meeting, it was COVID. The number was 19.7 million. But what has changed since then is that this hauling the sludge and all this stuff, and we Rick went down to Pennsylvania and saw these drying mechanisms and all that, and voila, we're up to $31 million. Is it safe to say phase one at $12 million was essentially because you have aged out things over there, like the secondary clarifiers? They didn't even make the parts anymore for that, like railway, whatever thing, right?
Let me jump in. So Pete, when was the first PR done? 2014, 2015, 16? Right. So there's a lot of time to sort of it was touched up in 18.
19 was the official, so we did it in September 16. That was the mechanism to get first, that was submitted along to get the first meeting grant,
Right.
updated for 2019 for the region.
Right. And that was driven because of the failures of
No,
the
I got you,
Yeah.
okay, and
Yeah.
I just wanna make sure, so everybody knew that, it's like, hey, we gotta do this. It's 12 million, but we need to go and replace those items that have aged out. The phase two of 19.7 million that was put together years ago was essentially the same concept of, we need to do this, we need to go in and get this aged stuff out. The additional 11 million that has come about is the I call it space age technology and stuff, that then created page 37 and 38 on the PowerPoint presentation that you did for us on June 24th. And this page that is a big, beautiful Excel spreadsheet that makes me get all warm and fuzzy because I love numbers, right? Essentially what it's saying is that the additional bonding cost of that 11 million is about $560,000 a year. Ouch. However, it's saying that with the landfill disposal savings, the septage revenue, the leachate revenue, the HSOW and sludge revenue, the cake receiving revenue, that once you bring all that revenue in, not only does it cover the $559,000 bond on that additional 11 million, but it creates a cash flow, a positive of $117,000 in year one, which technically you could go and use that positive to pay part of the rest of the bonding.
Sure.
Okay? Now, here's the thing, and this is where, and I think, during this process, I gotta be honest with you, I wanna audit this and rip this apart like it is my job, and the board's job. If these are real numbers, it is gonna be really a lot easier to go down this path, whether it's this fast, like in 2 months, or there's delays on it. But, very day one on June 24th, you had questions about this leachate. And you brought up how Marty and all that stuff. Now, we talked about it a little more tonight. Tonight's not gonna be the night, but I would, within this time, there will be some dedicated workshops and things to really nail down this. I don't think anybody has any questions about the 19.7 million. Maybe they do. But it's basically the 12 million phase one, 19.7 is just the second half of that. To go replace stuff that's aged out. But this additional 11 million, which has somewhat become now politicized, I hate to say, and whatever, I think it's great. And if these numbers are correct, it's fiscally responsible. Actually, you can take the cash flows it gets here, and you can move them right over to paying the remainder of the bond.
Yeah.
And you've heard me say that before, and it's somewhat, what do I want to say? If a project's going to cost $10 million, I need you to go out and get us $11 million in grants. It's an exaggeration to make a point. I think everybody knows, simple math. The more grants that we get on these projects, the less we have to bond and put the citizens in debt. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. Well, there's also, when you sit there and say, wow, an extra $10 million, that's fiscally irresponsible. What if that $10 million investment, year one, pays for itself? Year one, that's not even a return on investment calculation. Usually a return on investment calculation is it takes 6.2 years to get your money back. Is that correct, Paul?
Right.
But I want to go on record to say, and Pete, this isn't because I think that, I'm incredibly skeptical of this. I don't want to set any false expectations. And I really implore the board and the town attorney and our finance director and Matt and everybody, we need to dissect the living heck out of this thing as we go down this path. And, you know, because
Tom, there's a reason, let me jump in.
please do.
There's an essence, so you're looking at, it, and Pete and I have looked at this, Rick and I have looked at it, taken, I was at Denise involved, Pete's team, we've looked at those numbers, those are conservative numbers. And I think a few of you know, I'm a conservative guy, Pete's a conservative guy, we've always come in on target, or well above. But let's look at the other side of it. If that dryer doesn't go in, what's the risk?
Oh, it's huge,
Huge risk.
huge.
Exactly. So we're looking at technology that's been around. It's now, it's second, third generation, and it's going to take a risk off the town. And it's going to drive some revenue to pay for that other side. So yes, we need to look at that. I would definitely agree to sit down and look at those numbers again. Maybe we missed something. But at that same point, let's look at the other side of it. What if that dryer doesn't go in? What if the dryer just breaks even? But if the dryer doesn't go in, we went from,
We already
we already know where,
just from the hall.
we know where we are, where we were 2 years ago, to now. What happens in another year or two?
We're risking the cost of hauling,
Absolutely.
Right.
which
And-
has doubled in the last couple of years.
And we've shown, Pete has shown, we've shown landfills are closing. So I think in that
Worst case
evaluation,
scenario, you save $500,000 a year just in hauling issues.
Right,
That's the worst case scenario.
that's what they
Well,
call it.
what are you doing? You're supposed to help me out on this. You're supposed to pile on the skepticism with me. You're not supposed to back them.
I'm not saying we're gonna drive revenue, but
Right.
we're gonna save expense, that $500,000 a year for that dryer, because we don't have to haul anymore.
And that's the 500 we know today.
And then it would come back to your traditional return on investment, right? Then if we went really conservative, it's not cash flowing $100,000 year one, we'd have to reconnoiter these numbers and say, well, our bond cost for that is $560 a year, but we've saved $500,000. The 11, I don't know. You figure that out, return on investment.
Another component that Art had mentioned, I think that you mentioned back in June, was that we, at some point, may have the ability to take sludge from other municipalities. Is that a possibility also?
that's correct, if you jumped in, whatever. But that is, a little bit of that is factored in there. I think we talked about it last time. You know, this will give us a 1 to 2 year window of going out and talking to those communities
Right.
and, you know, see what's out there and develop that customer relationship.
Yes,
Absolutely.
within that spreadsheet, there's behind that, it's not just one sheet, but there's, and we sent that to our rec, and I gladly share it with the whole board, what, you know, essentially what our pro forma. So behind that, we've got the assumptions, so here's the categories, here's the outside sludge, here's the outside sludge take. So a facility that may not necessarily have an effective system, so they're still paying $125 a ton. They sent it to Webster would essentially just reduce the volume and then charge them a fee that would have to be established on, you know, so that's one component. It's leachate, it's the high strength organic waste. So there's such a drive to push organics out of landfills now, so food waste, that's happening.
I think it goes into effect January 1st, 2022, right?
On institutional users, yeah, they have to divert from landfills. So whatever that means, so, you know, in RIT, you know, it's basically, it's, you know, large organic facilities around here, just essentially colleges, for the most part. But then, I mean, there's a bunch of categories in there, so we've got assumed volumes, assumed rates, and, you know, each one of those essentially is kind of plug and play with the way it's set up. And you can actually do this to say, what's that zero, what's my break-even point? I've got a $500,000 adder for the dryer. There's a cost to operate the dryer because it does use a lot of natural gas, but you're getting a reduced. I think the actual sort of, you're still, the assumption we have built in here is the solids are still going to the landfill. So the reality is, they may not have to go to landfill anymore. We'll call house Class A biosolids now, so they can be, there's other alternatives that are out there. They can take organic recycling facility, so the landfill cost may go away, and that cost to get rid of it could be drastically increased. Conservatively, we've assumed there's continued landfill, and we've assumed, I think probably relatively, we've got an increase, an annual increase in landfill fees, but we think they're, 5% a year. The reality is landfill fees aren't going up 5% a year, they're going up a lot more than that.
Yeah, I
So-
think we kept in, probably $250,000 between 200,000 and 250,000.
Yeah, but there's still a disposal
Right.
component.
Because that's a conservative approach again, with the hope that we don't have a landfill anymore.
What is the, besides just losing 90 to 180 days, what is the risk of not following this schedule where we culminate on September 16th and we culminate in January or April?
Well, I think right now, the big unknown we have is we don't know when it's going to be announced. Typically, when they announce, it's aggressive schedule. So you typically have, it's hard to apply for a weed grant if you're not at least in the process of going through. So right now, the town is initiated seeker. We're under contract to initiate seeker, so that's really effectively almost no cost to the town to kind of complete that process. But the bond resolution really becomes that. So we don't know when we is coming out, so that's the risk. If you miss the deadline from WIA, then you're effectively waiting a year for the next round of grants. So really, again, this shuttle, we call shuttle run, it's a little bit different term of wastewater, but it's really the kind of legal positions you can apply for the grant, the largest grant that's out there now.
When you say you don't know when EFC and WIA will become available, you're saying
We're going off this year.
when we sit here right now, we don't know the time frame of when the, I'll call it portal of application opens up, when it closes, or the next fiscal calendar year, whatever.
We're going off of history. It didn't happen last year. I mean, last year I think we were having the same conversation. When it was WIA coming out, EFC was a month. So during all of 2020, they never announced. They did a limited CFA program last year. WIA never came out. We're expecting, given what Matt had talked about, there's so much money coming in as far as grant funding right now, and it allows us to be tied to that, that infrastructure money that's always been there, and I think there's going to be more. So we're basically proposing to put this project in a position that they can apply for the grant. If you want to,
I got it, and I will tell you this, I hope the town board really, if I'm interpreting what you just said correctly, we can do all of the sequence of these things, and that public hearing and then the bond resolution, we could delay waiting on finding when EFC and WIA says something. And I'm saying that because I'm just going to call it what it is. There's a real busy autumn that's going on in 2021 with this town and this board when it comes to financial things. Is that a good way to put it? So, I'm just being realistic to the fact that I don't know if I want to have personally 3 or 4 things that are affecting the town finances going on at the same time. I don't know. The board hasn't really.
I don't think this is something that we're prepared to wait for. I don't think we can be waiting on this.
I think we would show.
I think we need to,
times that we can't wait.
we need to do everything we need to do to be ready to give this a go.
I think we also have to consider many of the items that we saw in our budget meeting yesterday that desperately need to be done at the plant, that should we move forward with phase 2 will be incorporated into that.
Right.
If we don't move forward with phase 2, we're looking at incurring the costs of taking care of those items. And that's really foolish if we're going to think about phase 2 in the next, put it off another year. Well, we've already fixed those things and spent that money here. It doesn't, I don't.
Yeah, I might have described it right. I'm not.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
We're looking at some big things, but I also feel that from listening to Pete, listening to Matt, we need to position ourselves to get the most funding possible for a project that we know needs to be done.
Yeah.
And if we're not ready, you know that there are many other communities that better the result will be as far as funding.
And this next question, I think Art needs to be in the room, but maybe you can answer for him, okay? Is that, okay, so very colorful, and I love the colors, I really do. And it culminates on September 16th. So what do you envision would happen then in October, November? Is this we get the dolly and we go out and put together bids for, 3 different contractors?
Oh, no, we're not, we haven't designed it, so there's.
Okay, so now,
So
do the
this
aggressive
project-
timeline, just like, this is an aggressive timeline from today to September 16th. Doable, I mean, you laid it all out how it would have to happen. So the next step after the bond on September 16th is now we sit around in a way waiting to see when EFC WIA opens up. They didn't last year, but that's just, we've already said, Paul, we would go for the 31 million, and they go, we think we're gonna get a quarter of that back.
Right.
But we can't apply for it until they open that up. So that's the finance end. On the design end, then you guys, they go and design what?
So again, part of it is the process would be kind of tiered stepwise. So there's what's called pre-design investigation. So we have to go and do survey. There's some interior, there's a lot of interior work here on the digester buildings. It would require a lot of just vetting and going through something we call it some 3D survey. Survey, we have to do geotechnical investigation, so we have 4 structures. We've got this new septic facility, dryer building, a digester tank, and a couple smaller thickener tanks. They require geotechnical soil borings, geotechnical engineer to kind of go through and make recommendations for foundation design so we can then move forward. So that's part of what's called a pre-design investigation. There's certainly, and then it's just developing, call it preliminary design. Preliminary design, we typically take, say, 50% of what we call the final design. That preliminary design then gets submitted to the agencies. The DFC is funding the project. They would see it, they would do a technical review on it to make sure the money's being spent wisely, but also the DFC as well. So that gets you the preliminary design at that point. Then to kind of, you're waiting for those regulatory comments. And once you get those comments, you can kind of complete the final, go to final design. There's also any permitting requirements that we need to have. So for this project, we think we probably need a, construction stormwater permit. We're not entirely sure yet. That's not a heavy lift, but there's some regulatory permits, based on how the project finally lands and making their permit, what's called facility registration with the dryer itself. Those are kind of TBD issues, that would be kind of vetted out there in the design process.
Okay, and so, I'd ask, what happens after September 26th? Beat that into redesign?
Initial design.
And so after that, when does it come to the point of putting out some type of
So we have,
bid or
in
whatever?
the PDR, I don't know, we have a schedule developed that's actually dated. We, right now, I think the goal is, and is to really, what's that? I think we'd be looking at bid, essentially we bid bidding process right now, we're hoping spring. That's based on the schedule, but that was feedback from, what people like to see it, doesn't necessarily need to happen that way, but it's essentially, that's a hard push, to kind of get through that. And there are points where you complete your work and you're waiting on regulators to kind of get back to things. But right now, the hope is, at least the way the project is showing, it's just spring bid. Construction-wise, probably 2-year construction project. Depends on, how the design is set, how the specifications are written, so we can kind of provide some requirements for contractors on how quickly they need to get certain pieces done. Normally, there's project schedules and, liquidated, provisions for damages and that type of thing.
If all of the schedules were met, if everything went in line, bids were out and accepted and awarded, would it be possible to have that dryer in operation before the end of 22?
What is the lead time on either order?
Yeah, so it certainly would be the first we structured something the first thing, but it's a long, you know, it's, the dryer itself is, I think, about $3.5 million piece of capital equipment, so. Unfortunately, the one thing we're seeing is coming out of COVID, it's just the market, because there's labor shortage on manufacturers.
So the answer is no.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so.
Okay.
I mean, we kind of push, but there's a lot of stuff that's
Just
out of our
to-
control,
just-
so, yeah.
Yeah, I would go for the spring or fall.
I thought, Barry, you were gonna ask based on the bids and all that in spring of 2022, when would that 2-year construction process start?
Well, once basically, typically those to proceed. So we would bid the project, typically a 30-day window to bid a project. There's recommendations, so the town at some point in time, at some point after that, bid is received, and we issue a recommendation board. There's a notice to proceed, that's usually when the clock starts for contract. They get a notice to proceed, that point we're moving forward.
And I just typically think around August.
I think the earliest date you could possibly make would be August, first part of August,
Right.
more likely
September.
the end of September.
Right, and this still follows the schedule that was laid out in the PowerPoint in the DER.
I think he was, depending on how the schedule goes, and how the design process, you could always have a sequence process too, where you put the schedule on the drive and say 1 year, but the overall project could be 2 years, but that kind of puts the onus on getting the driver going earlier in the process. So I mean, early on,
I've been in the business a long time, so I have a fairly good feel for what this is going to take. It's not a 6-month project.
No, Phil, I already said, I really was hoping you would be public.
I looked at the numbers, the only questions I have on those are the actual, where they're gonna get the leachate, and is it gonna come to us? That's the big unknown. We're taking care of our own, that's saving us $500,000 a year in hauling fees. And that alone, to me, makes sense to put that part of the project in.
And the leachate of all these revenue things is the smallest.
And that was intentional.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't know, that's an unknown, you don't know if you're gonna get it or not.
I mean, I think early on, Barry asked a question about, getting together, getting the team that presented this, and I think if it's a workshop where we can bring that up on spreadsheet, or we can send you a spreadsheet and have at it, we can do it anytime. I mean, if you want to Zoom, we can come in and do one of our sessions around there, where we kind of get into it. Yeah, I think that needs to happen. That's ultimately, that's what the board needs to decide, is getting comfortable with those numbers.
So now that you're waiting on some things, the next board meeting that you are planning on coming to is the 19th of August, about 4 weeks from now. The seniors, all that. I mean, the board, does anybody have any after this? Like, there's no way we're gonna stay to this time schedule that's on this board, or like, we should try to stay this time.
We should try to stay.
Try and stay to it.
You betcha.
I don't think there's an option not to stay, but we had to.
Many problems with the plan.
Okay.
And we can eliminate fixing a lot of stuff, right, if we can get this thing going.
Because there's a cost to waiting.
There is, and
Paul's
sort of
gone.
keep this in mind, it's a verbal thing that if we replace some of the items that we talked about in the budget, and then in a year or two, they're probably gonna be ripped out when this project is done. So if we wait, we replace that screw compactor.
And then until we get the project.
Those are expensive Band-Aids.
Let's go.
All righty. Pete?
Nice talking.
Matt?
Set,
Thanks.
1, 2.
Huh?
It's a ready, set, up, 1, 2.
Yeah, right.
Well, I really appreciate the timeline and all the work that's
Yeah.
going into this, because it's very clear to all of us what the steps are, and I think that's,
Yeah, and I think once we have a kind of direction on the next step. That timeline will turn into a, something that roll out here, and it's gonna be long, it'll be long, but the design process is a lot more.
I heard that, Bill.
It'll be another wonderful bigger Excel spreadsheet.
For a while.
Dean, thanks.
It's
Art,
not-
and, and
Thanks, gentlemen.
almost had Well, I think this meeting is.
No, I got just a few more things I'd like to discuss, maybe 15, 22 minutes, something like that.
Goodbye, Art.
All right.
This is just an update. These CFA grants, so you can kind of understand. No one really wanted to look at. No one wanted to process the numbers regarding the last one, there's an assessment of what that could be.
I think I did.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Thanks, Matt.
It's an informal. Pete, thanks. Art? No, you know what, Art is a sarcastic side.
You good?
Thanks, Matt. You're killing me, Small.
You know what movie was it? What was it, the outfielder, or what was it?
Yeah.